Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 17 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Will. And as we're recording this, it's January 31st, and when it hits the podcast airwaves, it's going to be February 1st. So,
woohoo!
How was your January?
It was good. It was good. Not quite what I expected in some ways, but...
How so?
Well, a couple weeks ago, I got promoted in the day job. And I'm back in a role that I haven't been in since we moved to California. Mm-hmm. And so I'm getting used to everything that means again, because I haven't done that kind of job in a year and a half now. So figuring out how that impacts time and impacts the hours I spend on the day job and everything. So January had some unexpected twists in it, but it was all good.
You've been talking a lot on the phone.
Yeah, I have been very chatty lately. I've gone from maybe, at least this past week, from talking on the phone about an hour and a half a day for the job to, I swear, the majority of the day, especially since Wednesday on the phone a lot. But the good thing is it hasn't seemed to impact the writing schedule too much. I get that done in the morning before I kick into day job mode. Codename Wingers. Cruising right along on its edits.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. How's your week been? How was your January? Let's just talk big picture January.
Well, the reason I asked you, because I knew you would talk about it, I don't really have anything to talk about. My January was fine.
Well, good.
Pretty uneventful. Can't think of anything off the top of my head that was pretty, exceptional or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was if I hadn't been promoted, it would have been a run-of-the-mill month.
Yeah.
With us doing what we're supposed to do and just getting things done.
Trucking along.
Doing
our thing.
Yeah. Something cool that did come in the mail in January, which I'll reach over here and get so that the video audience can see it, is this lovely book. Let me just, stick it right in the middle of the camera. This big coffee table book is called Masterpiece of Man. And I hadn't heard of it until relatively recently when artist Michael Bayet mentioned it on his email list. Now, we've been a fan of Michael's art for quite some time, and again, if you're on the video, the cover of the book is actually one of his pieces. Yeah. We own a few reproductions. We buy his calendar every year to hang up in the house, and this book apparently was limited edition. It costs a pretty penny if you buy it off of Amazon as a resale.
Is it I won't even attempt to pronounce its actual title. It's in Italian. Was it published in Italy?
I believe it was published in Italy. Yeah. Michael got a hold of a few copies, I believe, in December for a reasonable price.
Yeah.
And I missed getting that. I had it. I was putting it in the cart, and it said there were some, and I got it to the cart, and there were none. And then he came back to his email list and says, I have more. And that time I was able to get a book, which thrills me. This book is gorgeous. It has a number of artists that I've heard of. It has a nice tribute section to Steve Walker, who's one of my favorite all-time artists. He's been on the cover of a few books. His artwork was used heavily, I believe, by Allison, maybe, or Kensington, back in the 90s. On some of their titles. It's gorgeous work. This book is awesome. I'll link to it on Amazon so you can at least check it out there, but my God, it's expensive on Amazon. I think it goes for over $1,000. Yeah. And I was pleased not to pay anywhere near that for it. Because that's crazy town, even for this gorgeous book. Yeah. But it's really nice. They did a good job. Lots of full-page reproduction of the artwork, lots of interviews from the artists, and commentary from either critics or art lovers or other artists about the artists. I think it covers easily over 100 artists, so it's worth looking at if you're into that, at least checking it out on Amazon, and I'll see if I can link up to some other information on it in the show notes, but made me very happy to own this book.
Yes, indeed.
Speaking of art...
Well, very tangentially speaking of art, In case you haven't heard the news, coloring books are big business right now, and I have something to show the audience watching the video as well. I am, or recently have become, a coloring enthusiast. I'm showing some of my most recent pieces of... I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Well, and if people were watching the holiday episodes on the door, every week you added a piece or two to the door that was behind us in the holiday episodes through most of December.
Yeah, the reason I got back into coloring is because I needed something to do while I listened to podcasts. Excuse me. And we listened to quite a few together. Mm-hmm. You either, you work or you edit or you do something on the computer while we're listening. I can't do that. I can't listen to people talk and have to think about something at the same time. Mm-hmm. I need something to keep my hands busy that I don't have to think about. It's just I can't concentrate. Focused concentration on two things at once is hard for me. So I do crafty things or I color, something like that. Over the holidays, I made some of the paper chains that you may have seen hanging up in Jeff's office during this podcast. And so I do little tiny coloring or crafty projects.
But coloring's big. I mean, we've heard it on some of the podcasts we listen to that adult coloring books are kind of big business now. And there's a whole... It's a trend on Amazon and to buy them. And
I don't know. It's a fad.
It's a fad. I enjoy watching you color, though. I'll look over, see what he's doing.
And when I finish, I put them up on the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're supposed to do.
But as we were talking about this, I mean, the audience can definitely expect a question of the week at some later point about what do you do while you're listening to podcasts. That won't be this week, but it's a definite future one.
Yeah, I color, so there you go.
The other thing to chat briefly about, since we're back from winter TV break, is superheroes on TV.
Yes.
DC has managed to take over 4 of 5 weeknights between Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. I certainly like a lot what's happening on the CW with what they term the Arrowverse, since everything kind of sprouted off of Arrow. Mm-hmm. But even those 3 shows, along with Supergirl, are very much in line with the superhero that I grew up with. Because I grew up in the era of Super Friends on ABC Saturday mornings. And even the Marvel stuff that was on CBS with Shazam and that kind of thing, and ISIS. Where the superheroes, were good guys and they did their thing. And
actually, Shazam is DC.
Is Shazam DC? Okay, yes, forget I said that. See,
here's the thing. We're not hardcore geeks by any means.
No.
We are casual fans of superhero programming. So when we say something, blatantly wrong, please don't, jump all over us.
I'm sorry. I really thought...
someone would have noticed, and someone would have written in.
Yes, I'm glad you corrected that. But anyway, in my youth, superheroes were shiny, happy beacons of truth, justice, the American way, all that stuff. And even in the later, as DC became movies with Superman and Christopher Reeve, Superman was a good guy and he was doing good stuff. And I love what DC is doing on TV with their heroes. And at the same time, as we get really close to the release of Superman versus Batman to the theaters, I am less enthused about where DC seems to be going in the movieverse. The dark, brooding... And I get Batman's always brooding, don't get me wrong. Batman's a dark hero. He's always been the dark hero of DC. And I never saw the last Batman that Christopher Nolan did. Dark Knight Rises, or whatever that last one was with Christian Bale. But I appreciated the previous 2 films in that series. But this changing of Superman that started with Man of Steel, which is a movie I never could finish, I don't. It's not speaking to me. I'm much happier in the TV universe where there's humor and they're fighting for good, and yeah, they may be a little damaged because certainly Arrow's a little dark, but he's counterbalanced by Felicity's buoyant quips that come out every now and then, and people trying to keep his humanity intact. So yeah, loving the TV.
I think where the television series have really taken advantage of the format is that they have many episodes, an entire season to tell an interesting story arc, and they can focus on characters, and they don't have to worry as much with getting a certain number of big, expensive tentpole action scenes into a 2 or 2.5 hour, because these stupid, these summer movies are getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
So I think where these series are strongest is that it gives an audience a chance to know and relate to these characters, no matter whether they're funny and happy like Supergirl and Flash, or maybe a little darker and serious like some of the stuff that goes on Arrow. We really can, over several hours of television, kind of be drawn into and understand their world a little bit more. I think this has become more prevalent in the Marvel movies. I think they're hampered by a certain formula and by their shorter running time. With every movie that comes out, there are certain expectations of what Marvel. I'm picking on Marvel because they have a larger universe.
Yeah, they've been working on their movieverse more than DC has been.
So I think where they're hampered, and let's face it, that last Avengers movie was kind of a dog. It was
I liked it better than you did.
They're void. Anyway, so I think they're hampered by what those movies are supposed to be, and by the running time, and you have to shove 20 different heroes into a 2-hour running time. So I think especially shows like Legends of Tomorrow, you have a very large cast of superheroes, but you have several hours over the course of the season that they have to explore and tell each of those characters' stories. You have to shoehorn them into an Avengers type scenario.
And for some of them, we already know stuff because most of them spun off from somebody else's show where we were already somewhat exposed to them.
So, yeah.
But yeah, superheroes on TV, love it. And a shout out to Marvel's Agent Carter too, because I've enjoyed at least the first 3 episodes that we've seen since she came back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that story's going to end up making sense, but I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any sense at all so far. Here's I think...
But it's funny.
I do think it's funny. I really enjoy the cast. I love Haley Atwell and everyone else they've assembled on that show. I think everyone is smart and they're funny, and they're a great group of actors who are obviously having fun with their characters. But the story they have to execute doesn't always pan out or make much sense. So I thought the first season of Agent Carter was okay. I don't think... technically the move to Los Angeles doesn't, really make any sense. But that's where they are. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
fun.
It's enjoyable. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but yeah, whatever.
Zero matter. The brand new thing.
I don't know.
Anyway, moving on to the question of the week. Last week, our guest author Jordan Nasser asked, "How do the seasons affect your reading? The amount of reading and the kinds of books you're reading?" And we also had a giveaway going on with this. If you answered the question of the week, you were in the running to receive 2 signed paperbacks from Jordan for his Home is a Fire and the Fire Went Wild books. Congratulations to Eileen, who was the winner that we pulled earlier this morning. She responded that she never thought about seasons affecting the reading, but here in the Northeast, it gets dark very early and she tends to go to bed earlier. So she probably reads more in the winter because she does her reading before bed. But she then added if she takes a vacation in the summer that she can easily read a book a day.
Good. Christina said, I had to go back and see for sure, just like I did. It seems that when baseball season approaches, I start to read more athlete-find love books. Then through the summer, I go to cheesy and fun romance and fantasy. Seems most of my fantasy is done in late spring, summer. When October hits postseason, I'm not reading very much. Come winter, I tend to favor BDSM and darker books. I didn't realize this at all. I have some cheesy thrown in here and there in the winter and dark ones tossed in about the summer. But for the most part, I do tend to have reading seasons, and I didn't even notice. Well, I'm glad we could get you thinking and exploring those reading habits.
Because it certainly did for us, too. We had to think about the answers for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can see the other responses that we got on the show notes page for this episode.
Yeah. Okay. So today we have something a little unique and special. A couple of days ago, we talked to JM Snyder. We interviewed her. And the interview went a little bit long because we had a whole lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Today, we're going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, God, total.
Uh-oh.
Oh, man.
Reboot.
Reboot. Today we're going to be, I was going to say showing you, but no, we're not showing you. We're going to be playing you the first part of the... Thanks for letting me just hang there.
Sorry, I didn't know where you were trying to go.
So, going back, we have a really fantastic interview with J.M. Snyder, and today we're going to be playing you the first part of that interview. J.M. is an author, but she also runs JMS Books, and she's going to tell us a little about the sort of the origin stories of starting her own micropress, and she's also going to talk to us about a new series of stories that she has coming out through the press called Love Wins.
Mm-hmm. The Love Wins books start coming out on this coming Sunday, February 7th.
I almost said January.
Darn
it! It's February! It's February 7th, okay.
And you'll hear us have issues with the dates in the podcast, too. And occasionally it sounds a little weird, because we actually recorded this with the idea of playing it for the next episode. So some of it's geared that way. These books do start coming out February 7th, and they come out every week throughout February. I do have a story in that called Make the Right Choice, which involves Leo and Matt from my Hat Trick series. It's kind of their first time to come from being supporting characters to having their own book and tell some of their own story. I was thrilled that we got to interview JM. Mm-hmm. I love her book. In particular, the first book I read of hers was called Power Play. It remains one of my very favorite hockey books of all time, involving hockey player Ryan and short track speed skater Dante. They have a wonderful story. And I met JM at Rainbow Book Fair in 2011 to get her to sign my paperback. Mm-hmm. And in talking with her and telling her the story that I was writing, which evolved into the Hat Trick series, it's really what got me on board, because she was interested in seeing it when I was done. And, of course, she eventually published it through JMS Books, along with all of its sequels. So, with that, here is the first part of our interview with J.M. Snyder. We're very excited today on the podcast to welcome J.M. Snyder, who's both an author and a publisher, and I'm happy to say is my publisher for the Hat Trick series, along with some other stories of mine. Welcome, J.M.
Hello.
So for our audience who may not be familiar, if you could introduce yourself both as an author and a publisher, that would be great.
Okay. My name is J.M. Snyder, obviously, and I have been publishing erotic romance and romance since around 2000. I started self-publishing and then began e-publishing with the now defunct Aspen Mountain Press. And then I moved into e-publishing with Amber Quill, and I worked with other publishers like Torquay and a few others. And in 2010, I was speaking with a friend of mine who was not publishing with a publisher. He was writing free fiction online, publishing it on Nifty and such. And he wanted to get into publishing. And I, at that point, had some books that were coming out of contract. And none of the publishers who I was working with were taking reprints at the time. And we decided to start our own press. Or rather, he encouraged me to start my own press because he didn't want to get on the hook for it. So I started JMS Books and began publishing. At first, it was invite only, and it was very small, and it's still very small. But we opened it up to submissions, and we've done pretty well. In 2011, I quit my day job to go publishing and writing full time. Unfortunately, I don't write as much as I'd like, but the publishing takes over. I also write lesbian fiction under the name J.T. Marie, and I write gay YA fiction under the name J. Thomas. I've also branched into MMF fiction under Shauna Jean. I've found that if you write different genres, you should probably write under different pseudonyms, because not everybody who reads one type of story by you wants to read all of the other types of stories by you, which I understand. So I do write under different names, and I don't make it a secret. So, but now if you didn't know that, you know. So in a nutshell, that's me.
I didn't know about the MMF pen name. That was a new one for me.
Well, it's not, I have not written very much under it, I will admit. But, and most of it's very, very short, because it's sort of an experiment. But if there's like 5 books, 5 stories, and I think the longest is if it's 24,000 words, it's not very long. So it's a little harder to get it to write 3 different characters all in a scene at one time for me. My mind doesn't work that way, but it's interesting. It's different.
It's a lot of pronouns.
It is a lot of pronouns. At least it's not all the same pronoun.
True.
But I guess if I ever wrote, and I've written MMM before, and I tend to do that with a first person only, so I don't have he and he and he. But it's keeping everybody straight in the act. It's like, whoa, I don't know where. It's almost like playing what's that word? The game where you have Twister. That's what it's like. I just picture it as Twister on a bed, but yeah. I mean, it's fun, but it's different. Very different.
It is Valentine's week, and with that, you're putting out the Love Wins series.
Yes.
Starting this week.
Well, actually,
tell us a little bit about that series.
We started the week before. The first ones come out the week of February. Is it February 4th? Is that the Sunday?
February 7th is the Sunday. Then we come out on the 8th.
Yes, it's but the first. Okay, February 7th. I was thinking February 1st was. I get confused on the Sundays, just because January has to end on a Sunday. But it's the Love Wins series. We decided to come up with this after the Supreme Court decision that approved gay marriage, or legalized gay marriage in all 50 states. And we thought it would be nice to do a series of stories that had a celebratory tone to it. We wanted a contemporary series that celebrated gay marriage after legalization. They aren't all the stories are not set in America, because other countries have legalized it earlier. We do have one that is set in the UK. I want to say it's set in Ireland, but I'm not quite sure. But so we do have some that are not set in America, but they are set in other parts of the world that have it legalized prior to the Supreme Court ruling. And I wanted it to be not only MM, because we do have some FF authors who do have their own following. So we have 4 that are FF stories and the rest are MM. We are releasing 4 a week, and there's 4 weeks in February. So that would be 16 stories. I will admit at this point, they're not all up on the site yet because not everybody has turned in their blurbs. But that's the hardest thing I think most people find when writing a book is the blurbs. But I know I have issues writing blurbs myself. Trying to get a 20 or 30K story down to 200 words is very difficult to do. But I feel your pain if that is your problem writing blurbs, because I have the same issue.
Blurbs are awful, and
Blurbs
Will can attest to that because he helps me with my blurbs.
Blurbs are really bad. Now, the funny thing is that some distributors require shorter blurbs and longer blurbs. The shorter blurbs, once you've written the longer blurbs, are super easy to do. I can truncate 200 words down to 140 characters. I can't do it the opposite way. But yeah, blurbs are the bane of all writers. They're horrible. But they have to come to me all at once. Usually much later after I've finished the story. So, but no, the Love Wins series, hopefully readers will appreciate them. Some authors, we have actually several authors. We have you, and we have Tinian, who is they're revisiting characters who they've written in the past. My story also revisits characters from an earlier story. Drew Hunt's story does the same thing. I hope that readers will like that, because these are characters that they've seen in other stories and hopefully have grown to love, or at least wanted to know more about and wanted to see in a relationship or in a progression of their relationship that they did not have a chance to in the other story. But so we have at least 4 of those stories that will be a continuation or a revisitation of earlier works.
And hopefully, for people who might be new, that actually provides the entree into the series that those characters spun off from.
True, because those stories do, I think, stand on their own. I mean, like yours are it's a completely different story from the Hat Trick series. Like you can read the Leo and Matt story without having read Simon and Alex's. So you don't have to go in and go, oh, well, I've not read Hat Trick, so I can't read this. Whereas some stories you can't do that with. And Drew's Calvin and Brock, you don't have to go back and read his Calvin's Cowboy story to know who these characters are. He sort of reintroduces them early on. And my story, which it revisits my characters from It's All Relative, takes place 11 years after the fact, because it's been 11 years since I wrote that first story. So I sort of reintroduced them as well. You don't have to have read the first story where Michael came out to his family and introduced his army boyfriend. And now, it's Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been repealed, and gay marriage is now legalized. And so his boyfriend, now lover, is in the military, openly in a relationship with a gay man, and is going to propose marriage to him. You don't have to have read the other story, which is about Michael's dead aunt. So it would help. Those who have read them before are like, oh, finally we get to see these other characters, but you don't have to have read them. But when you do, you can go, oh, I want to know more, and you can pick up all of the 3 Hat Trick series, and then the 4, and then the free ones, because there is the one that's not free, the overtime that's not free.
Now, JM, the Love Wins series is it's a series of stories, correct? It's not like an anthology?
No, they're individual stories, because some of them, I gave the authors leeway as to the length. And some of them are around 12 to 20K, and some of them are 20 to 30K, and some of them are a little over. So if I put them in an anthology, it would be super, super long. We did a multi-author series over the summer called Heatwave last summer, and it was under the same criteria. And the books that came in, if we had put them all in an anthology, it would end up like 200,000 words. It would just be a ginormous book. It would be used as a doorstop. It would look like something Stephen King had put out. So yeah, it could be used as a weapon. And The Love Wins would be the same. Also, I have found that our readers don't necessarily, the ones who read the gay stories don't necessarily read the lesbian stories. So if we put out an anthology of the whole collection, I don't think that the lesbian stories would get the fair share of the readers, or people wouldn't necessarily pick them up because of the lesbian stories in the same book. They also have a different cover, obviously, to indicate which ones have the women in them and which ones have the men in them. Now, that's not to say that in the future we may do an anthology collecting some of them together and some of the, the ones that fit better together in a print collection. However, print sales, I will admit, are not all that they're cracked up to be. A lot of people who want print seem to be the authors. Readers seem to prefer ebooks at this point. Well, ebooks are cheaper, quicker. I mean, you can, if you decide you want to read a book, open up your Kindle or your phone and download it immediately. You don't have to wait for Amazon to ship it to you. So.
Yeah, I think what I've found at going to conventions is that readers will get buy the books or the authors that love the best in paperback.
Yeah.
Or will get a book on paperback that they've already read and know that they love it and then put it in their paperback collection.
Exactly. I mean, I have books in my library. I mean, I have a ton of books because I tend to buy books, but I have books that I will never part with because I love them. I read them all the time. These are the books that I read all the time. And then I have books that I've bought because they're on clearance or, they were at library sales and, oh yeah, this looks interesting. And then when I read it, or if I didn't like it, I pass it on. But for the most part, when I buy a book, I buy an ebook because it's cheaper. I mean, it's just the fact. Nowadays, it's easier to read ebooks. They're cheaper and they're quicker. So, plus I have a Kindle and I can hold 4 billion of them. Whereas, if you go to Panera to read and you want to read the new Harry Potter, or it's not new anymore, but you want to read Harry Potter, you can lug something that's like super, super, super thick, or you can take your Kindle and have all 7 at your hands. It's a easier thing to read ebooks. I think also with romance in particular and fiction as well, with people who are not, I don't want to really say closeted, but some people are still closeted about it, but people who don't want to admit that this is what they read, particularly romance, but also gay fiction and I'm not just talking about people who are scared to admit this is what they read, but people who don't want to admit to, say, their husbands that this is how much they read. They can download it and nobody has to know. They've got 15 books they bought this week because there's no stack in the corner, and they don't have to hear, oh, when are you going to read all these? Well, you have no clue how much I have. 4 million books. You don't see the credit card statements. Thank goodness. But so they can hide their addiction a little bit better this time.
So when you're selecting books for JMS Books, what do you look for? What's the trademark of a JMS book that you could tell a reader, this is what you'll find when you buy a book from me?
Well, early on, we had a broader scope. When I first started the publishing company, we were sort of open to anything that was LGBT and anything that was genre specific that I was interested in. I like sci-fi, so we published some sci-fi stuff that was not LGBT. We published some mystery thriller. We dabbled in everything. And then as we went on, because this year is our 6th year in business, as time went on, I realized what we could and could not market, what worked for us, what worked for our readers, what people liked from us, what people were looking for. And so we've honed that down, and we continue to hone that down. And I think that you have to do that in order to stay relevant to the business. You have to know what works for not only your authors, but also for your readers. Because I've always heard as a author, oh, well, the readers stay with the publisher. And I never really understood that. But I think that that's true. I think that we have a set number of readers who like our books and who will take a chance on new writers who publish with us as long as we give them the type of books we've published in the past. So starting in about 2014 and on, we were very specific in honing our guidelines so that we were looking for what works for us are very romantic stories. Happy ever after or happy for now. That is a viable ending. The ones that do best for us don't necessarily have to have erotic content in them, but when they do, they have to be very steeped in romance. I think a lot of people send us submissions that they think are gay fiction, that are not fiction. I think that a lot of authors don't understand the concept or the difference between the two. And that if you're going to submit to JMS Books, you really need to do your research in what we've published recently. I tell a lot of authors who send us multiple submissions that we turn down, I say, look at our bestseller list, which I publish on our site under quarterly bestsellers. Look and see what sells for us, because that's where that's the sort of stuff we're looking for. Just because these are the stories that are doing well. These are the stories that we like. These are the ones that that our readers like. These are the types of stuff we're looking for. We're looking for really loving relationships. They don't have to necessarily start out that way, but they have to end that way. We don't necessarily take a lot of BDSM. We have in the past, but people don't really tend to like that from us. Contemporary sells better for us than other genres. I don't know why that is. I know some publishers do really well with historicals, but we don't really tend to. We have tried paranormal. Some paranormal works better than others. So it's really on a case-by-case basis with that. But when I say paranormal, shifters sell better than vampires. I guess, but everybody's over vampires at this point. Thank you, Twilight. So I don't understand why you would like one over the other. I would think if you like paranormal, you'd like it all, but what do I know? Lesbian is not as big a seller for us. I am always hesitant to take some lesbian stories because I feel I'm always conflicted as a publisher, because I always see it as a publisher and as an author myself. And as an author, I always feel like you should do your best to reach your best audience as an author. So I know everyone always thinks that of me as a publisher, but I always want to also say, as a publisher, yes, this is a good story. But as an author, are you reaching your best audience? Should you not maybe also try a lesbian-centric publisher? I don't want you to limit yourself to a audience that is mostly interested in fiction. And I don't know if that is always the best thing to do, maybe not, but I don't want you to just send us a lesbian story without considering your other options. Because some of them sell really well for us off the charts. Lesbian romance does very well. Lesbian erotica, not so much. Lesbian erotic romance that's contemporary does well, but if there's other if the gist of it is anything other than the romance, not so much. And YA seems to have, I don't know. I don't know about the YA market at the moment. It seems to have lost. Well, we were doing real well with YA for a little bit, but it seems like YA is not as profitable to the authors as it used to be. We've increased our word count minimum because the shorter stories were not selling well for our authors. And I think a lot of readers want longer stories in YA, which I can understand because I myself like longer stories. And I think that the YA genre is inundated with longer stories. And by longer stories, I mean like trilogies. I mean, look at the Hunger Games and, I mean, Harry Potter. How much longer can you get? So I think that the younger readers really want characters that they can invest in. And short stories are not that. And there is such a dearth of queer characters in YA that I think that it would behoove us to really give them something of length that they could connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we're just not seeing that too much. I do like stories like Hat Trick where they can grow with the characters. I think that's perfect because obviously younger readers, and this is a very difficult thing for people who write YA to understand, is younger readers always read older than they are. When I was younger, I read Stephen King because there was very little for us to read at that age. Now you've got 50 million things to read. There's a huge YA genre, but when you're 13, you're not reading books for 13-year-olds. You're reading books for 16-year-olds. You're reading books for 17-year-olds. So if you want to write for a 13-year-old, it's very difficult to do. You have to write older than the age that you're targeting because that's what they're reading. Nobody wants to hear that, but
yeah.
Just
going back to the gay fiction thing real quick. As a publisher, what is the difference to you between MM fiction and gay fiction? Is it just the romance quotient?
Well, I think that romance is very strong in MM as opposed to gay fiction. We've gotten a lot of gay fiction submissions that are very well written, but they don't have, they're literary stories. There's not anything in there that is erotic or romance, or it's very autobiographical, almost like a memoir. And it's not. It's fiction, but it reads like a memoir. And we've tried that as well, publishing that in the past, and it does not work for us. That's not to say that it isn't a valid literary genre and that it doesn't work well for other publishers. And when we do get submissions of that ilk, I'm probably different from other publishers in that I will make an attempt to tell an author, this is a very good story. It's not right for us, but here are some publishers who may be good for you. I know some publishers don't do that. Some publishers are like, sorry, it's not good for us. Thanks. I don't think that that's fair to an author whose book or story is written well. I think that it can be very discouraging when you don't know where else to try. So I do make an attempt to say, have you looked at this press or have you looked at this press? Because I know that it may be difficult for you when you're a writer and you're searching for presses or publishers, and they don't differentiate, and they're like, oh, these are gay publishers, and they list everybody, and you don't know the difference between X, Y, and Z. So you're just sending them out, and nobody is telling you why they're turning your story down. So I try, if your story, I try to give a little bit of guidance to that sometimes, if I have a chance.
If you had to put JMS into sort of a niche, would you consider yourself, do you call yourself a small publisher?
I call myself a micro publisher. A small press is usually, they say it's like 1 to 50 employees. I think that's disingenuous. I think a lot of small presses, what we think of as small press is, because what we think of as traditional an unfortunate term, because we're all traditional publishers in that we are not vanity presses. We're not asking authors to pay us to publish them. Small press is usually a smaller venue, and I guess I would fall into that term. And almost all of the e-publishers I can think of would be considered small press. They're not any of the big six in New York. However, I consider myself much, 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 much smaller than, say, Lucid or Torqueray or Dreamspinner or any of the others, in that I don't have a staff under me. I don't have the investors. I don't have staff. I don't have anyone other than myself.
Mm-hmm. Meaning that you contract out things like editors and things like that?
Yes, I contract editing.
Okay.
So what's coming up this year for the imprint?
Well, other than The Love Wins, I will admit that I don't plan too far ahead in much of anything, which is unfortunate. I mean, in any part of my life, I don't plan much ahead. Yeah, I've been told that's not a good thing, but hey, I've gotten this far. So, I tend to not like to plan too far ahead anyway, because I get nervous when there's too much that far ahead. But we have The Love Wins in February, and we do have several submission calls out there. I've found that in the past, when we've had submission calls, the unfortunate thing is a lot of authors write to submission calls and don't submit until the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of that myself, particularly when like anthologies and such. I will be the one who, this is a great anthology. I have an idea, and I will write to it and submit it at the 11th hour. So with that in mind, we've decided to start putting out submission calls that are on a rolling basis that are due every month. So in March, for instance, we have in the end of February, we have a submission call for short stories that are called Men at Work. And it's basically men who find love on the job. That's been a theme that has worked well for me in the past. And there are stories under 10K, which is a good starting point for authors who are not familiar with us or who are not working with us yet, who might want to get their feet wet or try us out. They don't have to commit to much. They can just send us a short story and see if they like working with us, earn a little bit of money with us, and then get in the door and maybe want to send it something longer later on down the line. Then we have a submission call that ends at the end of March that is an alpha omega call, which is, from what I've been explained, because it is not one I came up with. It was one Drew came up with, and he apparently likes the genre. It doesn't have to be werewolves, but it can be werewolves. But we have a book that we published this month called First Omega that was very popular. It was actually hit #1 on all romance ebooks for several weeks, which was quite surprising. And we've never had a book hit that high on such a large website. So that was interesting. So we have that submission call. It's for slightly longer stories. That's going to be due at the end of March. And then we have some that are rolling calls. It just means that as the stories come in, we'll schedule them for release. There's 3 of those. And we picked those themes based on what does well in the market, what we think that readers like. One is for single, or not necessarily single, but gay fathers who find love. That's a theme that apparently my readers tend to like, which is odd since I don't have children. Apparently I write them very well. But my brother has 5, so I guess that's where I get a lot of my ideas from. And then similar to that, men who are drawn together over their love of animals. And then Backup Buddies, which is about partners who find love. Partners being, like cops or firemen or men who work together who find their relationship on the workforce or takes them further together, takes a deeper meaning outside of the workplace. That's what we're doing at the moment. I was thinking of doing something in July, which is our anniversary month, but I haven't really hammered that out yet. But I guess I better soon. But I don't know. I was thinking of doing like an anniversary themed stories. I don't know if that would be much of interest to anybody, but
Interesting.
So there was our first part with JM. She'll be back next week, and we'll finish that off with some more stuff about publishing, as well as her own author journey and what's coming up for her this year, including her own installment in the Love Wins series.
Mm-hmm.
So, question of the week for this week. What is your preferred size and length for books?
Yes, I
Yes,
did come up
stop
with
that.
I came up with this particular question. So, yeah. So husband, what is your preferred size or length?
You know, I'm not going to go where what you're all here giggling about. Crazy man.
Okay. Let's be serious. All right.
I don't know that I have a particular preference here, because tell the story. I want to feel like you've told the story. I don't want to feel like you've either rushed it or that you're filling space for it.
Okay.
I'm happy to read books that are over 100,000 words. And I don't just mean, in the genre. I've read some long books in the genre. Wade Kelly loves to write over 100,000 words, and I dearly love her books. I'm also happy to read non-genre ginormous books like, Harry Potter 7 and Stephen King's The Stand and Under the Dome were, doorstop books that you could hurt somebody with. Thank God for the Kindle for those. But I'm also happy reading little short stories, too, and novellas. I think, tell a story you've got to tell and make the story not rush and not feel bloated, and I'm good.
Yeah.
I have a non-answer to that question.
That is a non-answer, I suppose. I do not prefer doorstops. Doorstops turn me off. I think it's just a question of time. I look at that thing and that's like, it's too much of a time investment. So if I see a ginormous... It doesn't matter how popular or how awesome everyone says a book might be. If it's, a 700-page behemoth, I'm not going to touch it. And the same goes for an ebook. I do look at all the metadata before I click buy in most cases. I do impulse buy ebooks, but I still research them. I want to know what they're about and what I'm getting myself into. And part of that is, double checking the Kindle page length. So I prefer shorter category fiction in most cases. So with a romance that's a full-length novel, that's usually 200 to 300 pages. Anything over 300 I might, think twice about, maybe. I also prefer novellas. I think novellas are nice, a nice, quick, fun read. I go for those. So I do prefer them category length or shorter, just personally, because I have commitment issues. Time commitment issues are a thing for me, so yeah.
All right. So let us know what your preferred size/length is for the books that you read. You can leave those answers on the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com. And remember, if you want, suggest a question for us too, because we're always on the lookout for future questions.
Okay. I guess that'll do it for this week.
I think it will.
Okay. Please tune in next week. We'll have the second part of the James Snyder interview. And while you are busy downloading the newest episode of our podcast or the back episodes, we've got lots of great back episodes as well. While you're at your favorite, what's the word? Downloading place? Your favorite...
That's as good as any. I don't know what you really call those. When you're at your place where you're either watching or listening.
Yeah, when you're on iTunes, if you appreciate and enjoy this show, we would appreciate if you would share that with other people by leaving a review.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody have a good week. Hope your February gets off to a good start, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. For detailed show notes, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com.